Fieldworks Beyond Measure is an exhibition that Todd and I have put together that evolves out of our ongoing Fieldworks project. Todd's a photographer and I'm an art historian and a writer. And for the last 5 years or so, we've been collaborating on projects that derive from fieldwork that we do in the deserts of the western United States. And this exhibition takes the theme of measurement and its limits as its kind of organizing framework. And we've brought together a number of images, texts, objects from our evolving archive that we gather during our research, and we're presenting it here in exhibition.
The Fieldworks Initiative is something that developed out of a project that we first did, or at least I was part of in 2013, called The Road to Richer. It was a project that we collaborated with the Fred Jones Museum of Art at the University of Oklahoma. And what that project centered around was Ed Richer's book, 26 Gasoline Stations. So we used the book as a framework for the first Fieldworks project. Students, both in the School of Art and geography students, about 20 of us climbed into a group of vans and we just hit the road, kind of the whole Route 66 tour between Oklahoma and Los Angeles. And using Richer's book, we kind of plotted out where those 26 gasoline stations were, and those were the places where we would stop along the way. And whenever we got to one of these sites, we would just pile out of the vans and begin kind of exploring the place and collecting photographs and materials we would find there.
And so I arrived at the university and met Todd and found out about that project, and it was really exciting. And so we sort of started scheming on how to do it again. And in 2015, we went back out on the road and we organized that trip around getting to Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty, which is on the Great Salt Lake in Utah. But we took a really long and circuitous route throughout the 4 major deserts of the western United States, and visited a whole lot of other places along the way. And for me, the challenge was initially what I was doing in that van at all. I'm an art historian. I knew I was going to see one of these famous earthworks from the 1970s, and that was interesting, but what was my role in the rest of the project? And so it quickly became about defining what an art historian and a writer is supposed to be doing when you're driving along, visiting things that ostensibly have nothing to do with art. And so I sort of attuned myself to start perceiving kind of the artfulness or the artistry in a whole wide range of human activities, and to help students to see that as well, and then to sort of further my own ability to perceive and understand what I'm engaging with. So in the van, it's often I'm scribbling notes in a notebook, thinking about the place that we just were, or in anticipation of the place that we're headed, or I'm on my phone researching something, trying to figure out what's going on, or talking with students about the experiences that they're having, and helping them understand things and learning myself from what they're telling me about what they've seen. So the experience in the van is a really dynamic kind of conversation that goes on, that really informs a lot of the work that we're doing, because in talking to one another, whether that's Todd or whether that's a group of students, we're all kind of mutually learning from each other, processing experiences, beginning the kind of interpretative work that needs to be done that ultimately results in an exhibition.
The work is largely centered in the American West, and particularly in the deserts of the American West. And so we're really interested thinking about how the land reflects the larger kind of relationship between nature and culture. That relationship exists everywhere. The desert is wonderful for a lot of different reasons. First of all, we just love being there. But the fact that the space is so immense, the landscape is so austere, is that so much of these things that we're looking for, and I don't mean literally physical things, but these things that we're looking for are right there on the surface where you can find them.
Yeah, and I just add that the Western US has a really complex history, a very layered history of different occupants throughout time, of cultural exchange and contact and violence and colonialism and settlement. And so that leads to just really kind of complicated places to go and to see and to think about things.
For this exhibition, really the kind of cornerstone for the installation are the narratives that Robert has written. You want to talk
Yeah,
about
sure. I mean, the idea was kind of a call and response where I would produce a series of texts and then Todd would select photographs that related to those texts. And so we were thinking about the theme of the show, Beyond Measure, and we were thinking about the need for something to kind of prompt how the installation would come together. And so I sort of offered, why don't I think about measurement and start writing and draw on some of the sites that we visited, find stories or anecdotes or facts or whatever it might be that relate to some of those places. And then on the basis of those texts, Todd would be able to go through the thousands and thousands of photographs that he has and make some selections to pull together the kind of installations that are here in the gallery. And so I was thinking about measurement and its limits when I was writing those texts and trying to connect that to particular locations that we've been. And as I was writing, I also started to think kind of a lot about the theme of life. That started just coming up over and over again, the theme of life. And in each one of the texts, you'll find either that word or some version of that word, like enlivened or something like that. And I just noticed that basically what was happening as I was writing is that I was picking up on this notion that people are living in these landscapes and that their lives are playing out in this way or that way, or they have in the past. And so that became a kind of thread running through the texts, which were also about measurement, of course, and about measurement of its limits. And so I produced those texts and then passed them over to Todd, and I'll let him take over here and talk a bit about what he did.
So yeah,
with
Robert gave me these great texts to work with. These I'm calling them narrative texts.
Yeah, they have narrative aspects.
Yeah, they have narrative aspects to them. And then I sat with them for a while, and I used those to kind of think about laying out different spaces within the gallery, and that the text would be kind of the key to what's kind of going on with that collection of images or objects or things like that. And this relationship between text and image is that one, they're co-equal. One's not reinforcing the other.
Yeah, it's not that the images illustrate the text or the text explains the images.
Yeah.
We want to stay away from that.
And so we want there to be this dissonance in some cases. Some cases a more, comprehensible dialogue that happens between the text and image.
Yeah.
And so that's really important to us in terms of how this show's been laid out and how I think we're planning on working a little bit more in the future.
This was a story that I hit upon because Todd wanted a story about Las Vegas. It was the one prompt he gave me to prompt him with, and I wanted something that would be both very much Las Vegas and also maybe something that you wouldn't quite expect. And so I started reading around about the history of people like Howard Hughes and the Mafia and the Rat Pack, all these very Vegas things. And I found this story about Sammy Davis Jr.'s wedding, which was a really sort of kind of horrifying story about him being basically forced to marry a woman for reasons that had a lot to do with race. He had been dating the white actress Kim Novak, and the Mafia took offense to this and wanted to basically break up an interracial relationship. And so he was threatened and then almost immediately married a black woman that he had actually paid to be his wife. It's a really messed up, ugly story. And it got at a lot of what goes on in America, and it got at a lot of what goes on in Las Vegas as well. It's Sin City after all. And so I thought it was a really interesting prompt then for Todd to build out this kind of collection of images and to think about the ways in which Las Vegas is one of the places where America is at its ugliest or its worst. It can be a really fun place to be too. But Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a favorite book of mine because it really dives deep into the kind of unseemly aspects of what this country can be. And so I thought that story about Sammy Davis Jr. Really did that, and I paired it with an anecdote about Howard Hughes, who's this wealthy, billionaire. There's plenty of analogs for him in our contemporary experience as well. And Hughes kind of famously became a recluse toward the end of his life and did really kind of wild and eccentric things that he had kind of the privilege and the ability to do because of his wealth. And so I wanted to kind of bring all of the kind of gross things about about Las Vegas and about America together in that one story and play them off of one another. And the fact that the woman, Lori White, that Sammy Davis Jr. Married, actually worked at one of Hugh's hotels, provided a kind of hinge or pivot that allowed me to connect their two stories, which were running more or less contemporaneously anyways.
So this video is a collection of two different video elements. The one on the right is from the Border Patrol, their public relations office. It's the video from a thermal imaging camera, and it is is capturing the time in which 247 migrants crossed the border fence at a site in New Mexico. The one on the left is a list of 244 instances of migrant bodies being found within the desert. In this particular case, this represents all of the bodies that were found in Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument in the period of about 2001 to 2020. So in thinking of measurement, thinking of information, data, those kind of things, these are two very different ways of kind of measuring the political complexity of the situation on the border. I'm kind of interested in presenting those in a way in which you're confronted with both, and you have to make meaning yourself from that collision.
For me, the goal is to facilitate people to become more thoughtful, to give people what they need to think through their experiences in their lives and to understand themselves and their environment and other people. And so I think that's the goal here as well, is to create an exhibition that's a place people can come to slow down, to look around, to see some things and learn about some things that maybe they weren't aware of previously, and to leave with an enriched sense of their own lives and the world around them.
All of this stuff is very ambiguous in terms of its relationship to meaning and knowledge. It's open-ended, it's perhaps poetic, but as Robert said, it's a space where, and that's what we're trying to do as both an artist and a writer, is create discursive spaces in which people will have these conversations and hopefully be thoughtful about some of these ideas that we're kind of trying to get out there in front of them.